Hi everybody, I'm getting a little bit of a late start tonight. Apparently taking 3 summer school classes was not my brightest idea. Tonight I'm going to talk about privately run for-profit prisons. My question I'm posing to you guys is, do you think that prisons are just for rehabilitation and detention? They are not. A lot of prisons are now privately run for-profit institutions that are unethical and need to go. I'll be discussing the fact that privately run prisons lead to mass incarceration, that they're unethical, and that they're in fact more dangerous than both state and federal run institutions. So private run for-profit prisons tend to lead to mass incarceration. State and federal governments are well aware of this fact. A statistic that I found was that 26,000 people were confined in privately run institutions in fiscal year 2017. That was an increase of 442% since 2002. That's according to an article by Gray Gatson and Isabel Batson in 2018. States are well aware of this fact. As a matter of fact, the state legislature of California passed an Assembly Bill 32, was Governor Gavin Newsom, banning California from entering into any new contracts with private prisons or any companies that run private prisons, and stating that all such contracts should be phased out by 2028. Governor Newsom said that these privately run prisons lead to mass incarceration and go against what we stand for in California. It's according to an article by Tom Healy in 2018. The state has also passed some legislation called the Truth in Sentencing Laws. This legislation and laws were passed in a big part because of the aggressive lobbying of the privately run prison system, the money that they threw behind it to get them passed. The new Truth in Sentencing Law requires that inmates serve 80 to 90% of their sentences before becoming eligible for parole, according to the ACLU. The companies that run these prisons profit from both an increase in inmates and a length of their stay. The GEO Group Incorporated, which is one of the 2 top earning privately run prison corporations, grossed $2.3 billion in 2018 and signed new contracts that avoided bills passed at limiting their expansion and control in California. What they stated in a report was that our growth is generally dependent on our ability to obtain new contracts, to develop and manage new correctional and detention facilities. The possible growth depends on the number of factors that we cannot control, including crime rates and sentencing patterns in various jurisdictions and the acceptance of privatization. The demand for our facilities and services could adversely be affected by the relaxation of enforcement standards and practices, sentencing standards, leniency and convictions. Oh my gosh, sorry, my camera shut up. Leniency and convictions and parole standards, and the decriminalization of certain activities that are currently prescribed by our criminal laws. So what this means is that they're well aware of the fact that if there are relaxed sentencing laws or decriminalization for things such as marijuana use, less enforcement efforts, less lengthy stays, that this cuts into their profit margins. The way that they actually receive these contracts is extremely unethical. They obtain and maintain their contracts through a series of illegal practices. For instance, private companies have joined with lawmakers, corporations, special interest groups, and advocates for privatization. They have contributed additional funds to sit on task forces, and they've sponsored events hosting legislators. What this means is that they're in essence bribing their way into business contracts, having their employees sit on task forces that determines things such as enforcement efforts, bills that are passed, re-election efforts of judges and prosecutors that tend to over-prosecute or over-sentence low-level crimes. That was according to their own report of the California Correctional Association of America in 2010. There have been instances of judges handing out sentences an average of 28% longer stays for private correctional facilities and taking kickbacks or profiting personally from doing such thing, according to Tom Matthews in a report for the New York Times. From 1999 to 2010, the Correctional Corporation of America spent on average $1.4 million per year lobbying the federal lobbying at federal level, and employed an average of 70 lobbyists at the state level. So they are pouring money into making sure that laws are passed in their favor, that sentencing guidelines are strict, and that they have judges, prosecutors, and the prison system in their pockets. In California, where this state requires lobbyists to disclose the contributions in detail, we know that the Correctional Corporation of America, which is the corporation that these privately run prisons are a part of, it uses resources to support additional adult and juvenile detention centers being built and to oppose the bills that would outlaw private prisons entirely, according to a report for the New Washington Post by Charles Margulies in 2013. Another issue with the private prisons is they are not as safe as state or federal run prisons. Private prisons have more instances of dangerous disturbances. In recent years, disturbances in several prisons have resulted in extensive property damage, bodily injury, and even the death of correctional officers. It was found that it was regularly understaffed in crucial areas, including correctional officers and health service workers, according to Tom Davidson in a report for the Truth in Sentencing Guidelines Journal. Private prisons also cut costs at the risk of safety. When the GEO Group, which is the second largest privately run prison group, operated an East Mississippi Correctional Facility, it invested in staffing, training, resources, and equipment, which jeopardizes prison staff and inmates. That's from a report from Cynthia Gilna in 2018. Instances of riots, prison deaths, and injuries to both prison personnel and inmates increased 38% in for-profit prisons in the same report. Correctional officers tend to receive less training than in private prisons receive less training than those in federal or state-run prisons. Private prisons have a higher turnover rate. Their training and resources are the first things to get cut at a demand for higher profits. In Mississippi, for example, guards make only $24,670. That's $4,000 less than the median income. They only get 4 weeks of training at private-run prisons in comparison to 12 months of training at state or federal-run prisons. This tends to lead to correctional officers being particularly susceptible to trafficking and contraband and relying on violence to control the prison population, according to a report by the ACLU. In summation, for-profit prisons should be phased out entirely as they increase mass incarceration. They are unethically obtained contracts, and they are much more dangerous to both prisoners and to inmates. Prisons should be institutions for detention and rehabilitation, not for profit at the cost of our community. Thank you.